In this lesson, we'll explore the common problems analysts face when working with Excel for data analysis. You'll learn why traditional reporting workflows are time-consuming, how data explosion happens when combining data sets, and how Power BI solves these challenges using data models and automation. Let's dive in.
Okay, so now let's try to explore some of the problems in the process. If you don't have an ETL or a data warehouse, I would assume this is something that you would do in Excel. Most of the people follow some form of this process. So what is the problem here?
It's time consuming.
Okay, so why is it time consuming?
Because you're repeating the same thing every time.
Yes, exactly. That's right. It's a repetition. That's the problem. If you have to kind of just do it once, that's fine. But the problem is what you're doing here, you have to do it every week, every month. If you're doing weekly reporting, again, you will extract all the reports. All these reports will come back with the same problems, and you have to perform the same cleaning steps again. And problem is repetition. It's not really the time. If you just have to spend time once, that's fine. It's the repetition manipulation. That's exactly right, because this is the space where we have to spend a lot of time. And I have not met any person who can say, you know, my organization has like 100% clean data. There are no issues there. Most of your time, if you're doing some kind of an analysis, will be spent here. I would say like 60 to 70% of the time is doing this part. You just have to make sure your data is correct, is in the right shape, so you perform this part. There's a lot of repetition, it's time consuming. That's one problem. What else? What about Excel's limitation of handling the big data?
Well, we just don't use Excel. I don't use Excel.
Okay.
Because you can't use Excel for big data.
Correct. Like, although Excel can handle 1 million rows, but you know, as soon as you go above like 20,000 rows, 300,000 rows, it starts to, you know, Excel starts to go really, really slow. And then, you know, you just have, you know, you just, it's a bad process. Another problem that I want to, you know, dig a bit more here is this flattening of the file. And this is the process where a lot of problems starts to happen in Excel. And this is one of the challenges that Power BI solves. This is where the data starts to explode. Because what you're doing is you're bringing a lot of columns from a lot of data sets and putting it into one single flat file. And this is where, you know, you start to reach limitations of Excel. So imagine this, you have your sales data, and you have, let's say 50,000 rows, still very small. You have your sales data, it has, you know, product, you have quantity, and you have price, and you have, let's say, sales ID. You have 50,000 rows. There is another very small data set, let's say 10 rows. It gives you product, and it also gives you category of a product. Let's say this is 10 rows. Sales data does not have a category. You want this field to come here, and obviously you will use VLOOKUP. But the problem is, this is a very small data set. It only has 10 rows, and this one has 50 rows. Once you do the VLOOKUP, you actually convert a 10-row data set into a 50,000 rows. I'm just giving you an extreme example to make a point, and you do this all the time. And when you're flattening the file, when you're bringing different columns from different data sets and putting into one single file, most of the time you're actually doing it from a small file to a big file. And data that can be stored in a very small table actually gets converted in a very large data set. And what Power BI allows you to do is it allows you to actually keep the data separate. It says if you have a 10-row file, if you have a 10-row data set, you keep it separate. If you have a 50,000 row data set, keep it separate. And let's just connect them together. And this is what we call a data model in a very simple way. So you don't have to flatten the file. You can just keep the data sets separate, and you can just establish a relationship. So 10 row remains 10 row, 50,000 row remains 50,000 row, and you still get the same effect of small, you still get the same effect of a flat data set.
You'd still need some sort of common denominator between them to be able to
Correct.
look it up, correct?
Correct. So you can still think of it in the same way as you would think about VLOOKUP. You know how when you would do a VLOOKUP, you still need something to look for in the other data set, and that is your common denominator. So in this example, in this one, that is your name of the product. So product and product is the common denominator. That's how you just connect, but you don't really need to actually bring all the values back into the big data set. You just make the connection. Yes, so you need the keys. So if I use a bit of a jargon, I try to avoid jargon as much as possible, but we call it primary and foreign keys. So use these keys to make the connection. And we are going to go into a bit more detail once we actually, go through the topic. So that's your data modeling. So data modeling solves this. Power BI can handle much more data sets than Excel can. You can actually load 1 billion rows in Power BI. For Power BI, 1 million row is not a big data set even. It's a small data set. Once it starts going above a billion rows, that's when you can realistically say that we are getting into a zone of a big data in Power BI, and let's think about ways how to handle that. But before that, Power BI is really good with like really, really big data sets. It has a technology which really compresses the file and saves it as a very small file. If you have 1 million rows of data, if you will save it in Excel and you will save it in Power BI, the size of Power BI file will be much smaller, like 7 times smaller. Data model, that's one problem, is so time consuming, and the other one was it just data model solves problem that we have with data explosion. What else? What about the fact that when you create something in Excel, you kind of send the email, there are not you can save it in OneDrive, and now you have some methods in the cloud to share it, but usually you would just share it with your team in the email, and then there is a bit of a back and forth. They are not like good ways of sharing the file. And if you once you share a file with your manager and your team, your manager comes back and saying you need to make some changes into the file, you make the changes, and then you only send it back to your manager. So your manager has a different version of truth, your team has a different version of truth, because it's not, you're not sharing it in a very controlled environment. So Power BI also solves this problem by actually sharing what you see with everyone else. So once you make a change in the file, you just share it just how you would share a OneDrive link, and they can actually see the report in the cloud. We are going to go through some of the sharing methodologies in Power BI, but just know that everyone sees like the same version of truth because how you share it. So you can actually control security and access. If you have any experience with SharePoint, you can actually make people members, like viewers, members, and control what data they see. So in the base, so this report can be shared with the Sydney team, Melbourne team, and Brisbane team, and let's say management. It's the same report, but Sydney team only sees Sydney data, Melbourne team only sees Melbourne data, and management sees everything. You don't have to create multiple copies. You don't have to create multiple copies of the same data set. That I know a lot of people do with Excel if they want to hide something and they don't want to share some of the stuff with other team members. They create a copy and then just share it. You don't have to do it in Power BI. You can still have the same version of truth, but how you share it, that's where you can actually control the security. Secure sharing. What else? Power BI visualizations are much better looking than Excel visualizations. They are interactive. You can click on one visualization and it actually starts to speak with other visualizations on the page. It looks better. You have more options of the visualization. So you can say enhanced visualization. Power BI can also establish connections with a lot of data sources if you have worked with Power Pivot and Power Query in Excel. So that is the same technology we use in Power BI. If you have not used it, that's fine. That's the same technology. There are a lot of data connections which are there. For example, some of the popular ones are, SAP HANA. You have SQL Warehouse and SQL database, Excel, of course, one of the popular one, Salesforce. So there are a lot of connections which are already there. So you just need to make a connection, provide the right credentials for Power BI to access the data. So there are probably like 100 plus connections. That's a brief overview of just a comparison between Excel, the challenges in Excel, and how Power BI kind of solves it. Let me just reshare my other screen back, and I will come back to the slide. And so this is, whatever we discussed here, this is just in a single snapshot. So you get raw data, raw data coming from your systems, from, all the softwares that you use in a business. Then you perform the data transformation, you clean the data. Essentially, data transformation is same, missing values, blanks, duplicates. Data modeling is you just make the connection between the data set. Data enrichment is including some additional columns, and this is your visualization. And then you have sharing and collaboration. This is your entire BI process, snapshot of your entire BI process. Get the data, clean, make the connection, enrich, create the visualization, and share. Let's have a look at all these steps in a bit more detail on how it is actually done in Power BI. So this is a bit more detail of the same steps because we are going to perform the same BI process in Power BI. So getting the data. Now data transformation via query editor. If you have used macros in Excel, you can think of query editor and query formula language. Query formula language is also called M language. Informally, it's a short name for query formula language. So what this engine does is query editor, it actually creates a code automatically. So every step that you perform to clean your data, let's say you perform a step to remove blanks. Every step that you perform to clean the data, Power BI stores every step automatically as a script. And that script is written in M language. We are going to see it. The benefit of doing that is Power BI can actually rerun the script next time, and you don't have to perform these steps again. So Power BI automates your data transformation by using this scripting language called M language. And we are going to see that. Once you have done that, we perform the data modeling in relationship view. DAX, if you have not heard about DAX, you will eventually start hearing about DAX a lot more, once you progress in Power BI, once you start learning a bit more about Power BI. So DAX is a formula language. So M is the scripting language. You can think of M really as a macro. If you have used macro, it automates your data cleaning, M language. Then we also have DAX, and you can think of DAX as your Excel functions. It does not really work as Excel functions. It looks very similar to your Excel functions, but what you do is you perform the calculations. You multiply your unit price and you multiply your quantity to get the revenue, then the profit, then the profit margin, maybe, month on month change, year on year change. So DAX is the language that allows you to do calculations. This is where you perform data enrichment in Power BI. Once you have done that, you perform your visualization and then you share. So DAX and M is something that we will just start looking into Power BI. So just remember these names, and a lot of people who start with Power BI do get confused on where should I use M versus where should I use DAX. So M is where you have to perform your data transformation, where you have to clean and convert your raw data to clean data. That's where you use M. And DAX is when you have to enrich your data, when you have to add few more columns into the data set to kind of enrich your data set for further deep analysis. That's where you use DAX. That's another view of the entire process of business intelligence in Power BI. So these are all the connections. These are all your data sources, you can say, that Power BI connects to. When Power BI connects to all these data sources, you perform the merge, your append, your transform, you kind of clean the data set, data transformation. Once you have performed the data transformation, then you do the data modeling. Now you can actually have a look at the data model. So you don't need to flatten the file. You can actually establish the connection. And in this way, it's more optimized. It's much more efficient on your computer. It can handle much more data set, but still you actually get the same results as you would get from a flat file. So that's your data modeling. Once you have done data modeling, you create a dashboard, and your entire process from here to here, from here to here, and back to here is automated. Next time, when your data sources change or your data change, you hit a refresh. Data transformation is automated. Data modeling is already there, and this dashboard will just refresh. So that's the entire process of business intelligence in Power BI. That's a quick overview. I also want to mention a few other things when it comes to Power BI, which is we essentially have three things in, three different tools in Power BI. One is Power BI Desktop. Then we also have Power BI Service. By Power BI Service, what I mean really is, you go to powerbi.com and look at all the reports and visualizations in the cloud on this website. So that's Power BI Service. We also have mobile. You can download a mobile app of Power BI from Android, iOS, and you can see these dashboards and reports on your phone. But there are few things that cannot be done in either these tools. If you have to think here, the only time you have to move to a service, all the steps from this till this can be performed in the Power BI Desktop. Only when you have to share it, only when you have to share it with the team, this part, this is where you have to come to Power BI Service. Because you have to first publish your dashboard into the cloud and then share it with the team. So all of the steps before that can actually be done in your desktop. So these are some of the comparisons. As you can see here, data transformation and your calculated columns, that's your data modeling, shaping and modeling. This is something you cannot do in service up till now. You can only do it in the desktop. You have to create the connections. You have to create the calculations. You have to clean the data. Now there are ways to actually clean the data in the service as well, and that we call data flows. Yeah, it's not here, but yeah, data transformation, shaping and modeling, calculations, you do it in the desktop. You can actually create reports, visualizations, and filters in either desktop, either service, does not really matter. But when you have to do the sharing, dashboards and sharing, all these terminologies might be very new for you, but you can think of it as broadly as sharing and control, sharing, security, and governance. Sharing security is something you can only do in service. Transformation and data modeling and calculations you can only do in desktop, and reports and visualizations where you actually create your map chart and pie chart and bar chart, you can do in either desktop and the service. And mobile, you can't really do much. Mobile is really just for viewing. You can view your dashboards, and you can share your dashboards with your teams. So viewing and sharing is something that you can only do on the phone, so not much really. Licensing. Okay, I think it should be actually easier for me to explain you from here. You can actually do everything with a free license. Most of the thing. Not everything. Most of what you can do in Power BI can actually be done by a free license. So you can, connect to the raw data sets. You can, clean your raw data sets. You can establish the connection. You can do most of the stuff in the free license. The only thing you cannot do is you cannot share it with your team. You will only need a pro license when you have to share, when you have to distribute or share what you have created on your desktop with the team. That's where you will need a pro license, where you have to collaborate essentially. If you don't want to collaborate, if you're someone who just wants to learn Power BI, and I think few of you said, I just want to learn Power BI, you don't really need any licenses. You can download a free version. You can practice as much as you want, and you can use all the functionality of Power BI without having to share it. And one of the things that people, which takes a while for people to digest, is you will not only need a pro license to share, you will also need a pro license to consume. So what I mean is, there's one person who has developed a report and developed a super useful report. He wants to share it with 20 people. You will need 21 licenses, not one license. Viewers as well as developers, someone who is sharing and someone who is consuming all need the licenses to do the job. That's called pro license. It's not very expensive. I think it's really, really reasonable. It's $9.99 per month per user. So that's how licenses works. Only comes into play when you have to share and collaborate. For bigger organizations, there's one more thing which we call as a premium capacity. So it's not really a per person license. It's really an enterprise level subscription, only useful if you are like a really, really large organization. Starts from $5,000 per month. So what you do is, if you have a subscription, you don't really need a pro license anymore. Anyone who can actually come into a certain space in your Power BI can view the reports. They don't need a pro license. So imagine if you have like 1,000 people viewing it. If you take a pro license, it becomes $10,000, right? Everyone. But if you have 1,000 people viewing it, you pay $5,000 and you have a space, and everyone with no licensing can actually come into one single space and do it. Power BI also has a calculator. So based on your size of the organization, you put the number of people in, you put the number of people who will be developing the reports, you put the number of people who will be viewing the reports, and it gives you a good estimate of what kind of licensing structure would be valuable for you. Yes, so you can share your PBX file without having a pro license, but as you know, your PBX file will also have a data source connections to it, probably let's say an Excel file. So you will also have to share an Excel file. You can share it without an Excel file, but what happens is if they will press a refresh, your file will break. If they will not press a refresh, that's fine. But yes, you can share it without the license. Okay, so we are now going to start with the file.